At my sister's wedding weekend, my mother got asked if I was Lily's real brother, then told me to smile and not embarrass her. That night, an old clue I'd tried to forget came back, a sealed file with my name on it. By morning, I wasn't heading to hair and makeup. I was heading to court. My name is Ethan Hale. I'm 38, and I live just outside Minneapolis, in a quiet townhouse I bought after years of telling myself I didn't need anything that tied me down. I work as an IT project manager for a regional healthcare network. Steady job, decent money. The kind of work where people praise you for staying calm when everything is on fire. Calm has always been my role. In my family, being calm meant being convenient. It meant taking the long way around an argument, swallowing a comment before it turned into a fight, and smiling through gatherings that left me feeling like I'd attended someone else's reunion by mistake. If you'd met us quickly at a grocery store maybe, or in the lobby of a hotel, you'd think we were normal. My mother, Marlene, is the kind of woman who remembers birthdays, sends thank you cards, and keeps her hair perfectly shaped even in the wind. My sister Lily is younger than me by 3 years, bright and magnetic, the kind of person who can turn a bland room into an event just by walking into it. My dad, Ron, is still alive, but he's the sort of man who has spent his whole marriage learning how to go quiet. He doesn't pick sides. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't get involved. And then there's me. On paper, I'm the older brother. In photos, I'm always there, usually on the edge of the frame, half a smile, hands in my pockets like I'm waiting for someone to tell me where to stand. I was never the rebellious kid, never the screw-up. I got good grades. I didn't drink until college. I didn't get arrested or crash a car or knock anyone up. So it took me a long time to admit something that should have been obvious much earlier. This wasn't about my behavior. This was about belonging. Growing up, it was little things first. Lily would forget her lunch and my mom would drive across town to bring it to her, while I'd once had to spend an entire day with a stomachache because I left my asthma inhaler at home. And you'll survive, Ethan. Lily got piano lessons, then voice lessons, then a cheerleading camp that cost more than our refrigerator. When I asked about joining a soccer league, my mom said it was too expensive, then bought Lily a new phone a week later because her old one was embarrassing. Even when she tried to be fair, she did it in a way that made me feel like a guest being politely accommodated, like she was checking a box, like I was something she'd agreed to, not something she'd chosen. And the strangest part was that she didn't act like that with other people. With neighbors, she was warm. With Lily's friends, she was the cool mom with snacks and jokes. With my friends, she was courteous, smiling, but distant, like she was talking to the kid who lived next door, not the kid who lived in the room down the hall. I used to think it was something I'd done when I was too young to remember. Some moment that set her against me. Some hidden disappointment. Some secret resentment. Then, when I was 16, I found something in the top drawer of her old desk. It wasn't dramatic. There was no hidden letter with confession ink. No photo of strangers. No plot twist tucked under a ribbon. It was just an envelope. Plain, thick paper with a county seal stamped in blue on the corner. The flap had been taped shut, then taped again. On the front was my name. My full name, neat handwriting, and in bold letters across the center, sealed, confidential, adoption records. At first, my brain refused to accept it. I stared at it so long my eyes started to sting. I remember thinking, this can't be mine. Maybe it's for someone else. Maybe it's some legal thing that has nothing to do with me. But it had my name. I didn't open it. I didn't even peel the tape back. I just stood there with it in my hands like it was burning through my skin. Then I put it back exactly where I found it and closed the drawer like I could seal the thought away with it. That night I lay in bed listening to the house settle, listening to Lily laugh at something on her phone in the next room, and I tried to tell myself that adoption didn't mean what my gut was insisting it meant. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe my mom had adopted someone else. Maybe I'd misunderstood. But from that day on, every little thing in our family life started rearranging itself in my head. The way my mom talked about Lily's baby pictures, how she'd tell the story of Lily's first steps like it was a sacred memory, while mine got summarized in vague, generic lines. The way my dad never joined in when she reminisced about when I was pregnant because she never said it about me. The fact that there were plenty of photos of Lily as a newborn in the hospital, pink blanket, name tag, my mom's tired smile, and none of me. I had baby photos, sure, but they started when I was older. 6 months maybe. 8. A year. No hospital pictures. No day you were born story. Just me, already there, when I finally gathered the nerve to ask my mother about it. Carefully, like I was handling a glass ornament, She didn't get flustered the way innocent people do. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't look confused. Her face went still. Her eyes sharpened. "Where did you see that?" she asked. That was her first concern. Not why I was asking. Not how I felt. Not whether it was true. "Where did you see that?" I told her I'd come across the envelope by accident. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't raise my voice. I asked as calmly as I could, "Am I adopted?" My mother's mouth tightened like she was biting down on something bitter. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said, "You're part of this family because we raised you. That's all you need to know." Then she took the envelope out of the desk and put it somewhere else, somewhere I never found. That conversation didn't answer my question, but it told me something I'd never fully understood before. There were rules in our house, and one of them was that certain truths belonged to her. After that, I learned to live with the uncertainty the same way I lived with everything else, quietly. I left for college. I built my life. I got an apartment, then a better one, then the townhouse. I dated, sometimes seriously, sometimes not. I learned how to cook meals that didn't come from a box and how to file taxes without panic. I became the person people called when they needed something fixed, explained, handled. I also became someone who watched family dynamics like they were weather patterns, predictable, cyclical, and capable of turning violent with no warning. The favoritism didn't disappear when we got older. It just changed clothes. When Lily got engaged, my mom treated it like a royal announcement. She called relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. She started collecting centerpiece ideas and dress pictures like she was planning a ceremony for the entire town. She cried in the kitchen over color palettes. She asked Lily's fiancé, Grant, what kind of whiskey he liked and stocked it for when he comes over. For me, there was no matching effort. No "how are you doing, Ethan?" that didn't feel like a formality. No curiosity about my life unless it related to Lily's wedding logistics. I got the official call about the wedding on a Tuesday evening after work. My mom didn't start with hello. She started with instructions. "Lily wants a bigger venue," she said. "She has her heart set on the Riverton Hall downtown. We're moving fast, so don't make this difficult." I held my phone between shoulder and ear, loosening my tie with one hand, staring at the dim reflection of myself in my kitchen window. "What does that have to do with me?" Silence, then her sigh, sharp and practiced. "Because families help. And you have savings. You don't have kids. You're doing fine." It wasn't a request. It was a judgment dressed up as a plan. I told her I'd contribute something, but I wasn't paying for a venue upgrade on my own. I said it calmly, even politely, like I was negotiating a vendor contract at work. Her tone turned sweet in that way that always warned me she was about to cut. "Well, of course Lily comes first right now," she said. "It's her day. Her day." And what I didn't say, because I was tired, because I already knew where it would lead, was that it was always her day. In one way or another, it had been Lily's day my whole life. Over the next few months, the wedding planning became a constant hum in the background of every conversation. Group texts, emails, calls, my mom forwarding me links to tux rentals and hotel blocks, Lily asking me which playlist sounded better for the reception entrance, like I was a helpful coworker instead of her brother. I was invited to the rehearsal dinner. I was asked to show up early on the wedding day for photos. I was assigned tasks like coordinating rides for an elderly aunt and making sure my dad had the rings at the right time. I did all of it because that's what I do. I handle things. But under that hum, something else started happening. Something quieter but heavier. Because Lily's wedding forced one question into the center of everything. What was I exactly in this family? If I was adopted, why had it been treated like a dangerous secret? If it was nothing, why hide paperwork and clamp down on questions? And why did my mother, of all people, the woman who could charm a stranger into telling her their life story, go cold whenever the subject came too close to the surface? I started thinking about that sealed file again. Not as a teenage shock, but as a piece of a puzzle that had been sitting unfinished for decades. And for the first time, I stopped telling myself I didn't need answers. I'm not proud of how long it took. I'm not proud that I let so many things slide just to keep peace, just to avoid confrontation, just to pretend a low-grade ache was normal. But something about the wedding made it impossible to ignore. Weddings are supposed to be about family. That's the whole performance. Rows of people who share history, who claim you, who stand up and say, "This is ours." I realized I had no idea whether anyone would ever stand up and say that about me. So I started looking. I didn't start by barging into county offices demanding files like some movie hero. I started the way I handle everything, methodically. I ordered copies of my birth certificate online, the version you can legally request without jumping through too many hoops. It arrived in the mail in a plain envelope, and my hands actually trembled when I opened it, not because I expected it to scream the truth at me, but because I expected it to lie. It listed Marlene Hale as my mother, Ron Hale as my father. It looked official, clean, normal, but I'd worked enough years around compliance systems to know one thing: documents can be created, names can be added, records can be amended, and what I'd seen as a teenager hadn't been a normal birth record envelope. It had said adoption records, sealed. That word mattered. Sealed meant something, had been legally locked away, protected, restricted. It meant there was a story someone didn't want easily told. Over the next weeks, I made calls on my lunch breaks. I searched public databases. I read about state adoption laws until my eyes blurred. I learned the difference between open and closed adoptions, between amended birth certificates and original ones, between what a person is allowed to know and what they have to fight for. Every time I hit a dead end, I felt my mother's voice in my head. That's all you need to know. But I didn't believe that anymore. The more I researched, the more I understood something that made my stomach twist. If my adoption file was sealed, it wasn't going to open just because I wanted it to. It would take a formal request. It might take court approval. It might take a judge deciding I had good cause. And even then, it might only be partially unsealed. In other words, the truth, my truth, was something I would have to earn like a stranger. Meanwhile, Lily's wedding date crept closer, and my mother's behavior grew sharper, like the stress of planning had pulled her filter thin. She snapped at waitstaff during a tasting. She criticized Lily's dress choice until Lily cried, then hugged her and acted like it was love. She treated my dad like furniture, and with me she started doing something that felt new, not new in spirit, but new in boldness. She started drawing lines, not in private, not in subtle hints, in quick casual comments that landed like stones. At a family brunch, when my aunt asked how proud my mom must be to have 2 great kids, my mother laughed lightly and said, "Well, Lily's always been my girl." It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't correct. She didn't include me. She didn't add an Ethan too. She just let the sentence sit there, clean and complete, like I wasn't part of the category. At another gathering, when someone mentioned how Lily and I must have fought a lot as kids, my mother smiled and said, "Oh, Ethan was never really like other boys. He kept to himself." Like I was an odd habit she tolerated. I watched Lily in those moments too, because part of my problem wasn't just my mom. It was the fact that everyone else went along with it. My dad stayed quiet. My relatives laughed politely. Lily either didn't notice or didn't want to. And I started to feel the ground under my feet shifting towards something inevitable. I didn't know exactly what would happen at the wedding, but I knew this: if my mother was willing to redraw my place in the family in casual conversation, then a day like that, big, public, full of relatives and speeches and cameras, would give her the biggest stage she'd ever had. And if she decided to use it, I needed to be ready. Because I was done being calm at the expense of my own dignity. By the time I booked my hotel for the wedding weekend, my decision had solidified into something hard and quiet inside me. I was going to find the sealed adoption file. I was going to learn what was in it, not to punish anyone, not to make a scene, but because I had spent my entire life living inside a question mark, and I couldn't do it anymore. I packed my suit, my shoes, the gift I'd bought Lily and Grant, and a folder of printed notes I'd made from my research: phone numbers, office addresses, legal terms highlighted like I was studying for an exam. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew I wasn't preparing for a wedding. I was preparing for a reckoning. The hotel room smelled like recycled air and lemon cleaner. I set my garment bag on the bed, hung my suit in the closet, and stood there for a moment with my hands on my hips, listening to the muffled hallway noise. The wedding weekend had officially started. Down in the lobby, there was a sign on an easel: "Welcome, Grant and Lily." The letters were gold and looping like a promise. I stared at it longer than I meant to, and something about seeing my sister's name in shiny script made my stomach tighten. Not jealousy, not resentment, more like a reminder that this was going to be public. All of it. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from my mom. 1 text: "Mom, call me now. We need to confirm photos. And don't be late." No hi. No you made it. Just a command and a warning. I called her back anyway. She answered on the first ring, already talking. "Where are you? The rehearsal starts at 6. Lily's stressed. Grant's mother is being herself, and your father hasn't picked up his suit." "I'm at the hotel," I said. I just checked in. Well, you should have been here earlier, she snapped, then softened her tone the way she always did when she wanted to sound reasonable. This weekend isn't about you. There it was, a sentence so familiar it almost didn't register anymore. Except this time it landed differently. I know, I said. Tell me what you need. She exhaled like she'd won. Go to your father's house, get his suit bag, and bring it to the venue. He forgot, as usual. Mom, I'm not a delivery service. Her voice went cold. Ethan, don't start. Lily's counting on you. If you want to be included, act like it. Included. That word stuck in my throat like a dry crumb. I'll do it, I said, because the alternative was a fight in the first hour of the weekend, and I was trying to save my energy for the thing I actually came to face. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my laptop bag. Inside it was a folder. Digital scans, notes, names, phone numbers, everything I'd gathered since I decided I was done living in the dark. I hadn't told anyone about it. Not Lily, not my dad, not my friends. It felt too strange to say out loud. I think my mother hid my adoption records and I'm trying to unseal them before my sister's wedding. If I said it, it became real. But it was real. And this weekend, everything felt like it was tightening toward a single point. I drove to my parents' house, technically my dad's house, because my mom had made a big show of downsizing 2 years ago and moved into a condo near Lily. She framed it like independence, like she was giving my father space. In reality, she'd moved closer to her favorite child and left my dad behind like an old appliance. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Trimmed lawns, quiet streets, porch flags hanging limp in the humid air. My dad's house was still the same beige split level with a mailbox that leaned slightly left, no matter how many times he tried to straighten it. He opened the door before I knocked, like he'd been watching. Hey, he said, and pulled me into a quick hug that felt more like habit than comfort. His eyes were tired. He was already dressed in slacks and a button-down like he was afraid to relax into the weekend. You forgot your suit? I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. Your mom called you. Yeah. He stepped aside. It's in the hallway closet. I didn't forget. I didn't want to go over there yet. Over there, as if Lily's wedding was enemy territory. I grabbed the suit bag and turned back toward him, and for a second I considered asking him directly. About the envelope I found years ago. About why my mom got so stiff whenever I asked basic questions. About why he always went quiet. But my dad had this talent, this survival instinct where he could make you feel like the cruel one for bringing up uncomfortable truths. So instead I asked something safer. Are you okay? I said. He gave me a small smile. It's a wedding. No one's okay. Then he hesitated, like he had something else to say, something heavier sitting behind his teeth. What? I asked. He shook his head. Just don't let your mother get under your skin this weekend. That made me laugh once, sharp and humorless. When has she ever not? He didn't answer. He just looked at me with a strange mixture of regret and caution, and as I walked out with the suit bag, I felt something shift. My dad knew things. Maybe not the full truth, but enough. And the fact that he wouldn't say it out loud meant this wasn't just my mother's secret. It was a family's secret. Shared guilt, shared silence. On the drive to the venue, my phone buzzed with another text. Mom, Grant's mother asked if you're Lily's real brother. Don't embarrass us. My hands tightened on the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went pale. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because part of me kept expecting the words to rearrange into something less cruel. Grant's mother asked if you're Lily's real brother, and my mother's response wasn't outrage. It wasn't defense. It was a warning to me. Don't embarrass us. The rehearsal venue was a restored downtown hall with exposed brick, tall arched windows, and a glossy floor that reflected everything like a stage. People were already there, vendors moving chairs, Lily's bridesmaids fluttering around in matching robes like they were in a commercial, Grant's groomsmen in shirt sleeves holding plastic cups of beer. Lily saw me and smiled wide, the way she did when she wanted the world to know we were close. She hugged me quickly and said, "Thank God you're here. Mom's on a rampage." "Where is she?" I asked. Lily tilted her chin toward the far end of the room. My mother was standing by the coordinator, gesturing with sharp little movements, her face tight with control. Even from across the hall I could see her posture. Chin lifted, shoulders back, like she was conducting an orchestra that refused to obey. I dropped off my dad's suit bag and tried to stay out of the way. I wasn't part of the wedding party. Lily had asked me early on if I wanted a role, but it had been phrased like an obligation she was offering out of politeness. Then my mom suggested I do a reading during the ceremony, and Lily said, maybe, and it vanished into the chaos. So I became what I always became, support staff. At one point, Grant's mother, Sharon, approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was dressed too well for a rehearsal, pearls at her throat, hair perfectly highlighted, the kind of woman who treated politeness like a weapon. "You must be Ethan," she said. "That's me," I replied. She looked me up and down like she was mentally pricing my outfit. "So you're Lily's brother?" "Yes." A pause. Then, in a voice light enough to pass as curiosity, she said, "Same parents?" There it was, right to my face. My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed even. "We were raised together." Sharon's smile tightened. "That's not what I asked." Before I could answer, my mother swooped in like she'd been waiting for the moment. "There you are," she said sharply at me, ignoring Sharon's comment entirely. "Ethan, we need you to run to the florist. The centerpieces are wrong." Lily appeared behind her, eyes wide with panic. "Wrong how?" My mother waved a hand. "Too much greenery. It looks cheap. Ethan will handle it." Sharon watched with interest, like this was confirming something she already suspected. I looked at Lily. "Do you want me to handle it?" Lily's eyes flicked to our mother, then back to me. "If you can, please." So I left the venue, drove across town, and stood in a florist shop arguing gently with a woman who kept insisting the contract said seasonal greens. I paid an additional rush fee out of my own pocket because the florist refused to redo them otherwise. On the walk back to my car, receipt in hand, I realized something that made my chest feel hollow. No one was going to thank me for this. Not really. They would just expect it, the way you expect a foundation to hold a house. You don't praise it. You only notice it when it cracks. That night, at the rehearsal dinner, the seating was a mess. The restaurant was upscale. White tablecloths, dim lighting, a wine list that looked like a textbook. The Hales were at one long table, the Grants at another. When I found my name card, it wasn't next to my family. It was at the far end, near distant cousins I barely knew. I stood there holding the little folded card, feeling stupidly embarrassed, like I'd shown up to the wrong party. My mother was already seated near Lily and Grant, laughing loudly at something Sharon said. She noticed me standing and lifted her eyebrows. A silent message. "Don't make a scene." I slid into my assigned seat and smiled at my cousin's husband like I was fine. Halfway through dinner, Lily stood to do a toast. She was glowing in that way brides get, like the world is briefly tilted in their favor. She thanked her bridesmaids, her friends, Grant's family. Then she turned toward our side of the room. "And my mom," she said, voice shaking a little, "for basically planning this whole thing and keeping me sane." Everyone laughed. She glanced around, searching, and her eyes landed on me. Her smile softened. "And Ethan," she added, "for always showing up." It was simple. It wasn't poetic, but it was the closest thing to recognition I'd gotten all weekend. My throat tightened, but before that warmth could settle, my mother clinked her glass and stood up immediately, stealing the air out of the room like she always did. "Well," she said brightly, "I'm glad my daughter has so many people who love her." My daughter. Then she looked straight at me, still smiling, and said, "And as for showing up, some people have to work harder than others to earn a place in a family." The words were coated in sugar, but they stung like acid. A few people chuckled awkwardly, assuming it was a harmless joke. Others went quiet, sensing something off but not wanting to touch it. Lily's smile faltered. She looked at my mom, then at me, confusion flickering across her face as if she couldn't quite understand why my shoulders had gone stiff. Grant stared at his plate. Sharon took a sip of wine, satisfied. And I sat there, heat rising up my neck, trying not to react, trying not to give my mother the satisfaction of seeing me crack. Because the truth was, I wasn't shocked. I had been waiting for her to say something like that in front of an audience. She'd been building toward it all day, little cuts disguised as humor, little reminders that I was on probation. Back in my hotel room later, I stood in the bathroom staring at myself under harsh lighting. I looked normal, successful, put together, and yet I felt like that 16-year-old kid again, staring at an envelope with the word sealed stamped across it. I opened my laptop, logged into my notes, and pulled up the list of contacts I'd gathered. There was one name I hadn't called yet because it felt like crossing a line. A retired county clerk listed in an old forum thread about sealed records. A woman named Denise Arlo, who'd allegedly helped adult adoptees navigate the process years ago, back when Minneapolis offices still used paper files and metal cabinets. I hesitated with my finger over the call button. Then I thought about my mother's toast. Some people have to work harder than others to earn a place in a family. My jaw tightened. I hit call. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. Older, wary. Hello, Miss Arlo? I asked. My name is Ethan Hale. I'm trying to locate a sealed adoption file connected to my name. I was told you might know how to point me in the right direction. There was a long pause, like she was deciding whether to hang up. Then she said quietly, Where did you hear my name? I've been researching, I said. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just need to know what's in my record. Another pause, then a sigh that sounded like someone opening a door they'd kept shut for years. Ethan, she said, slower now, like she was tasting the name. If your record is sealed, it's sealed for a reason. Families don't do that unless they're protecting something. I know, I replied. That's why I need it. She was silent for a beat. Then she said, Meet me tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. corner of Hennepin and Lake, coffee shop on the east side, and don't bring anyone. My pulse jumped. You can help. I can tell you where to start, she said. But listen to me carefully. Once you start pulling this thread, you may not like what comes loose. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, heart pounding, the room suddenly too quiet. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. The day of the wedding. I should have felt guilty. I should have told myself to focus on Lily, on being supportive, on behaving. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the soft kind, the sharp kind, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. I closed my laptop, laid my suit on the chair, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, traffic hissed on wet pavement. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed, and I realized that by this time tomorrow, I might finally know why my mother spoke to me like I was an outsider, or I might discover something that would make the word family impossible to say the same way ever again. I barely slept. I kept waking up, checking the time, then staring at the ceiling like it was going to give me a sign telling me whether I was doing the right thing. At 7:20 a.m., I gave up and showered. At 7:45, I put on jeans and a button-down, nothing that would draw attention, and left the hotel with my phone, my wallet, and a thin folder of printed notes tucked into my laptop bag. The coffee shop Denise had named was already busy. Morning light spilled through the windows and made everything look softer than it felt. People in yoga pants, people in suits, people with strollers, normal lives, normal problems. I spotted her immediately. Denise Arlo sat alone near the back, facing the door. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Gray hair cut short, practical glasses, hands folded around a paper cup like she was warming them. She looked like someone who'd spent her whole career listening to other people's secrets and learning not to flinch. I walked over slowly, like approaching a skittish animal. Miss Arlo? I asked. Her eyes lifted and pinned me. Ethan. It wasn't a question. I sat across from her. Up close, I could see tiny lines around her mouth. Smile lines, but also something harder, like she'd learned to keep her feelings locked down. I appreciate you meeting me, I said. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. How old were you when you found out? 16, I admitted. I found an envelope in my mother's desk. It said sealed adoption records. Denise gave a small nod, as if that tracked with something she'd already guessed. And your mother shut you down? Yes. She didn't deny it, though. No. Denise tapped one finger on the table, slow and rhythmic. Then your file exists. People don't write adoption records on an envelope unless there's a reason. I swallowed. Can you tell me where it is? How to open it? Denise leaned back slightly. I can tell you what you're actually asking for, because most people don't understand the difference. She held up one finger. There's the amended birth certificate. That's what you already have. That one makes the adoptive parents look like the biological parents. It's clean. It's meant to be. Second finger. Then there's the original birth record and the court file. Petitions. Consents. Relinquishment. Home study. Final decree. Sometimes notes you were never supposed to see. That's the part that gets sealed. My throat felt tight. So the truth is in the court file. The most dangerous part of it is, she corrected. I stared at her. Why dangerous? Denise's face didn't change, but her voice lowered. Because adoption isn't always a sweet story. Sometimes it's a cover. Sometimes it's shame. Sometimes it's a deal. I felt my pulse in my ears. Do you think that's what happened with me? I don't know, she said, blunt. But I've seen enough to know families don't punish a child for no reason. Favoritism that extreme usually has a source. A source, like a stain that wouldn't come out. Denise slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. This is where you start. Hennepin County Family Court. Records Division. You don't walk in and demand the file, because it's sealed. They'll shut you down. You ask for the case index. You ask if there's a docket entry under your name. Will they give me that? I asked. They can confirm existence. They can confirm dates. Sometimes they can confirm the judge's name. That doesn't open it, but it gives you a spine to work from. And then what? Denise took a sip of coffee, eyes never leaving mine. Then you file a petition to unseal. And you better have a reason that sounds good to a judge. I hesitated. What counts as a good reason? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, medical necessity can. Fraud can. If you suspect your identity record is inaccurate. Names, dates, sometimes that can. But I want closure isn't always enough. I thought about my mother's toast from last night, about Sharon's smug question, about the way my own family treated me like a volunteer. My mother is telling people I'm not really family, I said carefully, publicly, and she's doing it right before my sister's wedding. Denise's eyes narrowed. And you think she's going to do worse today? I don't know, I said, honest, but I have a feeling I'm walking into something. Denise stared at me for a long moment, like she was weighing whether to pull me back from the ledge or push me the rest of the way. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, old and slightly bent. She turned it so I could read the name. Jared Linwood, she said. Family law. Not cheap, not sentimental. He doesn't scare easily. I took the card with careful fingers like it might cut me. You know him. I knew his mentor, she said. And I know the court clerks. Listen to me, Ethan. Don't try to do this with emotions. Do it with paperwork. I nodded. Thank you. Denise glanced toward the window where the sky had turned a bright, indifferent blue. One more thing. What? If your adoption wasn't at birth, she said, you're going to find dates that don't match your family's stories. That's usually where the truth leaks first. My stomach dropped. You think it wasn't at birth? I think your mother wouldn't have left hospital photos out if she'd been there, Denise replied. That's not how women like her behave. Women like her, controlled, image-driven, a manager of appearances. I put the card in my wallet and stood. I should go. Denise nodded once. If you get stonewalled, don't lose your temper. Polite men get more answers than angry ones. I almost laughed. I've had a lifetime of practice. As I walked out, my phone buzzed again. Mom, hair and makeup running behind. Lily is freaking out. Where are you? I stared at the message and felt something odd. Not fear, not guilt, distance. For once, her urgency didn't pull me like a hook in the mouth, because I had a destination that wasn't hers. I texted back, handling an errand. I'll be there. Then I drove straight to the courthouse. The Hennepin County Government Center was a slab of concrete and glass that looked like it had been designed to make people feel small. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of metal detectors and old paper. People stood in lines, holding folders, arguments, anxieties. I found the records division on the second floor and waited behind a man trying to get a copy of a divorce decree. The clerk behind the glass looked bored in a way that suggested she'd heard every version of human misery already. When it was my turn, I slid my ID under the slot. I'm looking for information on a sealed adoption file, I said, keeping my voice steady. I understand I can't access the contents without a court order. I'm asking whether a case exists under my name and, if possible, the case number or docket date. The clerk didn't blink. She typed something slowly. What's your full name? She asked. Ethan Michael Hale. Date of birth, I told her. Her fingers paused on the keyboard for half a second, just enough for my heart to jump. Then she kept typing. Any other names? She asked, tone neutral. That question hit me like a shove. Not that I know of, I said. She glanced up, eyes flat. You'd be surprised. She turned back to her screen and typed again. The seconds stretched. Somewhere behind me, someone coughed. A printer hummed. Then she said, there is a sealed matter associated with that name. My mouth went dry. Okay. I can't provide contents, she continued like reading from a script. I can provide the case type and the filing year. What year? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. She looked down again. Finalized 1992. The world seemed to tilt. 1992. I was born in 1987. That meant I wasn't adopted as a newborn. I was adopted when I was 4, almost 5. 4 years of my life existed in some other context I couldn't remember, couldn't access, couldn't even name. My hands tightened on the counter. Can you tell me the case number? She hesitated, then slid a small slip of paper through the slot. This is the internal reference. It's not a guarantee you'll get the file, but it's what you asked for. I stared down at the numbers and letters like they were a code to my own identity. Can I request to unseal it? I asked. She tapped her screen. You can file a motion. You'll need to state cause. You may be assigned a hearing date. How long does that take? I asked. She gave me the kind of look clerks give people who ask time to behave. Weeks, months, depends on the court. My chest tightened. Is there any way to speed it up? She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. If you have an attorney and a strong reason, you might get in front of a judge sooner. But sealed is sealed. I nodded, forcing my face to stay calm even as my mind raced. Finalized 1992. I stepped away from the counter and moved toward a bench near the wall. I sat down with the slip of paper in my hand and stared at it until the ink blurred. 4 years. That explained the missing newborn photos, the vague stories, the way my mom talked about pregnancy only when it involved Lily. But it raised a worse question. If I wasn't hers at first, who was I? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. I answered because I couldn't ignore her on her wedding day. Ethan, she said, breathless. I could hear voices and hairdryers in the background. Where are you? Mom is. She's getting weird. She keeps saying you're making it about you, and I don't even know what she means. I'm on my way, I lied, then softened it. I had to handle something. I'll explain later. Lily's voice dropped. Is everything okay? I looked around at the courthouse, at people clutching their own files, their own truths, trying to get someone official to listen. No, I said quietly, but I'm going to be. I hung up and walked out into the sunlight, feeling like I'd just stepped out of a different life. In the car, I called the number on Denise's card. A receptionist answered, clipped and professional. Linwood and Associates. My name is Ethan Hale, I said. I need to consult about unsealing an adoption file. It's urgent. There was a pause, typing. Earliest consult is Monday. I gripped the steering wheel. I'm standing outside the courthouse. I have the case reference. I'm willing to pay for emergency time. Another pause, longer. Hold, she said. The line went quiet except for faint office sounds. My mind kept looping around that year, 1992, like a door I couldn't stop staring at. Finally she came back. Mr. Linwood can speak with you for 15 minutes by phone at 2:30 today. That's all we can do on such short notice. Thank you, I said, and it came out rougher than I meant. I'll take it. When I got to the bridal suite at the hotel, it was chaos dressed up as celebration. Dresses hanging from curtain rods, makeup palettes everywhere. Lily sitting in a chair while a stylist pinned her hair, eyes shiny with stress. My mother stood near the window, arms crossed, watching everything like a hawk. The second she saw me, her face hardened. Where have you been? She snapped. I kept my voice low, handling something. You disappear on the most important day of your sister's life and stroll in like nothing happened. Her eyes flicked over me, then away, dismissive. Honestly, Ethan, sometimes I don't know what's wrong with you. Lily glanced at me in the mirror, nervous. Mom, stop. My mother smiled, immediately sweet. I'm just trying to keep today from falling apart. Then she leaned toward Lily and brushed an imaginary speck off her shoulder with tenderness she never gave me. You don't need distractions. Distractions. That was what I was to her. Not a son, not a member. An inconvenience that threatened the picture. I stepped back and stayed quiet, because arguing would only feed her. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I'll give Lily that. The hall was filled with soft light, white flowers, music that made people misty-eyed. I sat in the third row on the aisle, close enough to see Lily's hands tremble slightly as she held her bouquet. Grant looked stunned, like he couldn't believe he'd gotten lucky enough to be chosen. For a moment, as Lily walked down the aisle and my dad stood, wiping at his eyes, I felt something warm. I wanted to feel proud. I wanted to feel included in the gravity of the moment. Then I felt my mother's gaze cut toward me, sharp as a blade, and the warmth retreated. After the vows during the family photo session, the line was drawn. The photographer, a young guy with a nice camera and a forced cheerfulness, clapped his hands. Okay, immediate family first. Parents, siblings, let's get everybody in. I stood automatically, stepping toward Lily and Grant. My mother's hand shot out and pressed against my chest. Light touch, but firm. A gate. Not you, she said, still smiling for the photographer. At first I honestly thought I misheard her. What? I said quietly. She leaned in close enough that only I could hear, but her smile stayed bright, camera ready. Don't pretend today, Ethan. You're not really family. You're just here. The room seemed to go silent, even though I knew it didn't. I could still hear the photographer talking, people shuffling, someone laughing nervously. My mother's eyes were calm, certain, like she was stating a fact everyone should already accept. My chest tightened so hard it felt like a physical pain. Lily turned her head, confused. "Mom?" My mother lifted her voice a notch, still sugar-coated so others could hear. "Ethan can take some photos from the side. He's so good at helping." Helping. That was how she erased me. Not with a scream, with a smile, and a role assignment. I stood there, humiliated in my suit, watching my mother arrange herself next to Lily, like the picture mattered more than the people inside it. And as the photographer counted down, 3, 2, 1, I felt something inside me snap into a clean, cold decision, because my mother had finally said the quiet part out loud. And now I had a case number in my pocket, a date that didn't match my life, and a lawyer scheduled to call me in a few hours. She wanted me on the sidelines. Fine, but she had no idea what I was about to bring into the light. I stood off to the side while the photographer kept snapping, my mother's smile bright enough to blind anyone who didn't know what it was hiding. Lily looked between us like she'd stepped into a scene where the rules had changed without warning. "Mom," she said again, lower this time. "What are you doing?" My mother didn't even turn her head. "Lily, sweetheart, we're on a schedule. Pictures first, feelings later." I felt my face burn, not because I couldn't handle an insult, but because she'd chosen the exact moment when cameras were up and people were watching. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't stress. It was choreography. So I did what I'd done my entire life. I made myself smaller so the day could keep moving. I stepped back, lifted my phone like I was just helping, and took a few photos from the side so no one could accuse me of making it about me. But inside, something had gone very still. When the photos finally ended and everyone began drifting toward the cocktail hour, Lily caught my arm. Her eyes were glossy, mascara untouched only because she'd been careful. "Ethan," she whispered, "I don't understand." What did she mean? My throat tightened. I looked at my sister, my little sister, who'd shared my cereal and my crayons in my childhood, but her face was framed in bridal hairpins and wedding light, and suddenly she looked like someone I didn't fully know anymore. Or maybe she'd never fully known me. "I'll talk to you later," I said. "Not here." Her expression pinched with worry. "Please don't leave." "I'm not leaving," I lied again, because what I wanted to do in that moment was walk straight out and never come back. "I'm just taking a breath." She nodded, but her hand squeezed my arm like she was trying to keep me anchored. Then my mother appeared behind her, smooth as oil. "Lily, honey, Grant's aunt is asking where to put the card box." Lily's attention was pulled away instantly, like it always was. My mother didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She'd already placed me where she wanted, outside the frame. Cocktail hour was held in a side room with tall windows and a view of downtown. People clinked glasses, laughed, pointed at centerpieces, like they were judging an art show. Every few seconds, someone hugged me and said, "So happy for Lily," and I nodded and smiled like a mannequin. Sharon Grant's mother found me near the bar. "Well," she said lightly, "that was interesting." I kept my eyes on the ice bucket. "What was?" She took a slow sip of her drink. "Your mother. She's very particular about labels." I met her gaze. Sharon's eyes were bright with that same satisfied curiosity I'd seen at the rehearsal dinner. "If you have something to say," I told her, "say it." Her smile sharpened. "I'm just surprised she said it out loud. Most families keep things like that in the attic." "Things like that." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Sharon tilted her head, pretending innocence. "Oh, Ethan, don't act like you don't know. Everyone knows something, even if they pretend they don't." Then she drifted away, leaving me standing with my drink untouched, feeling like I'd just been nudged toward a cliff edge. Everyone knows something. I scanned the room as if the truth might be written on someone's face. I saw my aunt murmuring to another relative, eyes flicking toward me then away. I saw my dad standing alone near a window, shoulders slightly hunched like he wanted to disappear into the glass. I saw Lily laughing with her bridesmaids, her smile strained at the corners. And my mother was in the center of it all, holding court. At 2:15, I slipped into a hallway to wait for the lawyer call. My phone showed 2:27, then 2:29. I could hear distant music, the muffled sound of a DJ testing levels. At 2:30, my phone rang. "Ethan Hale?" A man's voice asked, brisk. "Yes, this is Jared Linwood. You have 15 minutes. Tell me what you have." The directness of his tone was oddly comforting. No drama, no sympathy, just process. I leaned against the wall and stared at the patterned carpet. I found out as a teenager that there are sealed adoption records connected to my name. Today, at my sister's wedding, my mother told me publicly that I'm not really family. I went to the courthouse this morning. They confirmed a sealed adoption matter exists, and that it was finalized in 1992. There was a short silence. Then Linwood said, "You were born in '87. Yes, so you weren't adopted at birth," he said. "That matters. It means there was a life before this family, legally speaking." My mouth went dry. What can I do to unseal it? Technically, Linwood asked, you file a petition to unseal. You need cause. Judges don't like opening sealed adoptions without a legitimate reason because it affects multiple parties. What counts as legitimate? I asked. Fraud, coercion, medical need, identity issues. He paused. Also, if there's reason to believe your adoption was used to cover up something illegal, a judge will listen. My stomach clenched. I don't know if there was anything illegal. Then don't speculate, Linwood said. Bring evidence. What evidence? I asked. The envelope you found. Any document you can legally obtain. Anything showing inconsistent dates, signatures, names. His voice sharpened. Most importantly, if your mother has the final decree or court-stamped paperwork in her possession, that can give us a judge name and case history. I swallowed. I don't have it. Find it, he said simply. I stared down the hall toward the ballroom doors. Today? I don't care if it's today, Linwood said. I care if you want results. Listen, your mother saying something cruel at a wedding isn't by itself legal cause to unseal a file. It is motivation, not cause. So even humiliation wasn't enough. Not officially. Linwood continued. If you can bring me the case reference you got this morning, and any court-stamped paperwork you can find, we can draft the petition Monday. Depending on the judge, we might get a hearing in a few weeks. If there's a strong red flag, fraud, coercion, we push for expedited. A few weeks, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. That's the system, he said. Now, one more thing. When you get that file open, don't do it alone. Do it with counsel present. People make mistakes when they're emotional. I almost laughed at that. I'm not exactly known for emotional. Everyone is emotional about their identity, Linwood replied. Even the calm ones. The call ended with him telling me where to email the case reference and a reminder. Don't break into anything. Don't steal anything. If it becomes evidence, it needs clean hands. Clean hands. I stood there for a moment after the call ended, phone still against my ear, listening to the dial tone as if it might turn into an answer. Find the decree. Find anything with signatures. I knew exactly where to start, and I hated that I knew. My dad. Because if anyone had access to old paperwork without it being theft, it would be him. I found him outside near the venue's side entrance, standing under a small awning with a plastic cup of water. The wind tugged at his tie. He looked older than he had yesterday. Dad, I said quietly. He turned, and his eyes widened slightly, like he'd been expecting this moment and dreading it. You okay? He asked. I didn't bother lying. No. He looked past me toward the doors, checking if anyone was nearby. Your mother. Stop, I said. My voice came out firmer than I intended. I went to the courthouse this morning. The adoption was finalized in 1992. My dad's face went still, not shocked, not confused, just resigned. He let out a slow breath through his nose. Jesus, so you knew, I said. His eyes flicked away. I knew pieces. Did Mom adopt me when I was 4? I asked. Or did you? He swallowed. You were placed with us. It became official later. Placed. Like furniture. Like a foster arrangement. Like a solution. I stepped closer. Do you have any paperwork? A decree? Anything court-stamped? My dad's jaw tightened, and for the first time all weekend he looked angry. Not at me, but at the situation. She kept it, he said. Where? He hesitated. Then he said, in the safe. What safe? I asked, heart pounding. At the house, he said. The wall safe in the basement. She made me install it. Said important documents. My pulse spiked. You can open it. His expression twisted. I know the code. I stared at him. Why didn't you ever tell me? He rubbed his forehead, eyes closing briefly. Because every time I tried to push back, your mother reminded me what she could do, what she'd say, who she'd blame. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So you let her treat me like this. His eyes snapped open, pain flashing across his face. I thought keeping you in the house was better than losing you. The sentence landed heavy, because it suggested a threat I'd never seen. Losing you. Not emotionally, legally. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice level. Dad, I'm not asking you to fix the past. I'm asking you to help me get the truth. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded once. Okay. We left the venue in his car, pulling away from the wedding like two men sneaking out of a crime scene. My dad drove with both hands clamped on the wheel, jaw tight, eyes forward. I sat in silence, watching the city blur past, my mind racing through possibilities I didn't want to think. 4 years old, safe in the basement, documents my mother guarded like a vault. When we got to the house, my dad didn't turn on lights. He moved through it like a man walking through a museum of choices he regretted. The air smelled faintly of dust and old carpet. Everything looked untouched, like time had slowed here after my mother left. In the basement, he walked to the back wall and pulled a framed photo aside. Behind it was a steel panel with a keypad. He looked at it for a second, then at me. If you see what I think you're going to see, just open it, I said. He punched in the code with shaky fingers. The safe beeped and clicked. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then my dad swung the door open. Inside were folders, tax documents, property papers, insurance policies, and then near the back, a thick manila envelope with a county seal stamped on it. My name was typed across the front, Ethan Michael Hale, and beneath it, in bold letters, sealed, adoption file. My throat closed. My dad didn't touch it. He didn't even look at it for long. He just stepped back like it might explode. I reached in and pulled it out carefully. It was heavier than I expected, stuffed with paper. The seal wasn't wax, but it was clearly official, stapled, stamped, and marked in a way that wasn't meant to be tampered with. Mom kept it here, I whispered, more to myself than him. My dad's voice was rough. She didn't want it in the house when you were a teenager. She moved it to a lockbox for a while. Then she brought it back when she moved out. I didn't even know until I found the frame crooked one day. So she's been carrying it around like a leash, I said. My dad flinched. Ethan. I turned to him, envelope in my hands. You realize what she did to me today, right? She said it out loud, in front of people, like it was her right. He looked down at the floor. I know. I stared at the sealed staples and the stamped ink and felt a strange mix of nausea and clarity. This was it, the thing she'd hidden, the thing she'd used to justify every cold look and every favor handed to Lily like candy. But even holding it, I could feel Linwood's warning in my head. Clean hands. Don't break into anything. Don't steal anything. Don't open it alone. I looked at my dad. I'm not opening it here. He exhaled shakily, like that was the answer he'd been praying for. Good. I slid the envelope into my bag with careful control, like it was evidence in a case, like it was my entire childhood in paper form. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Where is your father? He's supposed to be in the reception entrance photos. Stop causing problems. I stared at the message, then typed back. We'll be there. My dad looked at me, eyes haunted. Are you going back? Yes, I said, and the word surprised me with how certain it sounded. But not the way she expects, because now, for the first time in my life, I had something she didn't control. We drove back to the venue in silence, the sealed envelope sitting in my bag like a heartbeat. When we walked in, the reception was starting. Guests were filing into the ballroom, music swelling, lights dimming. People cheered as Lily and Grant made their entrance, and I clapped with everyone else, smiling with my mouth while my mind stayed locked on the weight under my arm. My mother spotted us immediately. Her eyes narrowed, then she plastered on a grin and rushed over to my dad, grabbing his arm as if she owned him. Where have you been? She hissed, still smiling for anyone watching. My dad didn't answer. She turned her sharp attention to me. Ethan, you're unbelievable. Lily needed you. I met her gaze and felt something new. Not fear, distance. I'll talk to you later, I said calmly. Her smile faltered for half a second. Excuse me, I said later, I repeated, and walked past her. For the rest of the dinner, I barely tasted my food. Speeches happened. Laughter rose and fell like waves. People danced. Lily glowed. Grant beamed. And every few minutes I caught my mother watching me like she could sense the ground shifting under her feet. At one point, Sharon drifted by my table again, eyes gleaming. Everything going smoothly? She asked, sweet as poison. I looked at her and said, You're going to want to stay for the rest of the night. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh, I think you'll find it clarifying, I said. Then I stood, walked out into the hallway again, and pulled the sealed envelope from my bag just enough to feel its edge under my fingers. It was real. It was mine. It had been sitting behind a picture frame while my mother pretended she had the right to decide what I was. I opened my phone and emailed Linwood the courthouse reference number, then typed one more line. I have the sealed file in my possession, still unopened. How do we do this legally? As soon as possible. I hit send, and as I slipped the envelope back into my bag, I realized the next step wasn't about finding the truth anymore. It was about deciding what to do with it once it finally had air. The rest of the night moved like I was underwater. I watched Lily float from table to table, laughing a little too loudly, clinging to the happiness like it was a life raft. I watched Grant's friends slam drinks and slap him on the back. I watched my dad sit straighter than usual, as if he'd finally decided he was done folding into himself. And I watched my mother. Marlene kept glancing at me the way people look at a candle they're afraid will tip over, pretending everything is fine while calculating how fast they can smother the flame if it spreads. At 8:41 p.m., my phone buzzed. Linwood. Text. Do not break any seal. Bring envelope to my office Monday. If it's a personal copy, not court original, you may review it. Photograph everything. Don't read it publicly unless you're prepared for fallout. I read it twice. He wasn't telling me to keep quiet forever. He was telling me to be smart. But the problem was my mother had already made it public. She'd already weaponized my place in the family in front of relatives, in front of Grant's family, in front of strangers with champagne flutes. She'd said I wasn't family. And now people were watching to see whether I'd swallow it. I didn't want to blow up Lily's wedding. Whatever happened between me and my mother, Lily didn't deserve to have her day turned into a courtroom. So I made myself a promise. No screaming, no theatrics, no humiliation for humiliation, just the truth, stated plainly, with proof in my hand. I waited until the speeches were done and the dancing had started. The room was loud enough that a conversation could stay private if I kept it tight. Lily was on the dance floor with Grant, smiling like she was trying to convince herself it was all okay. My mother hovered near the DJ booth, chatting with Sharon like they were allies. I walked to my dad's table and leaned in. Dad, I need you for 5 minutes. His eyes flicked to my face. Now? Yes. He stood without argument. That alone told me he was done being managed. We stepped into a quiet side hallway near the coat room. The music thumped through the walls like a heartbeat. I pulled the envelope from my bag and held it between us. My dad stared at it like it was a live wire. Ethan, I'm not opening it here, I said. But I need to know what's inside. Enough to understand why she treats me like this. He swallowed hard. You might not like it. I already don't like it, I replied. He nodded once, then looked away. Okay. If this is a copy file, you're not stealing anything by reading what she kept. I didn't answer. I just slid my thumb under the flap and worked the staples loose carefully, bending them back instead of tearing. My hands were steady, which felt surreal, like my body had decided this was a technical task. Inside was a stack of documents, some court-stamped, some typed, some photocopied so many times the ink looked gray. The first page was the one that hit me hardest, because it was so ordinary in its layout. Final decree of adoption, county seal, judge's signature. Date October 14, 1992. My name typed neatly at the top, then a line underneath that made my stomach drop. Child's name prior to adoption, Ethan Michael Carver. Carver, not Hale. I stared at it until the letters stopped looking real. My dad's voice was quiet. That was your birth last name. You knew my last name, I said. I knew it existed, he corrected. Your mother never liked it being spoken. I flipped the next pages with careful fingers. There was a petition to adopt, signed by Ronald Hale, my father's signature, clear and unmistakable. Then another signature line, Marlene Hale, my mother, but the date next to her signature was different. Later, weeks later, and beside it, in a small typed note, there was a sentence that felt like it had been written by someone who knew exactly what this family was. Adoptive mother requested additional time to consider. Court advised child's permanency needs require timely decision. My throat tightened. She didn't want to sign. My dad didn't speak. He didn't need to. I kept going. There was a page labeled Consent of Biological Parent. It wasn't my dad. It was a woman's name I'd never seen before. Rebecca Carver. Then, in smaller text, deceased prior to finalization. My hands went cold. Deceased. My voice came out thin. My biological mother is dead. My dad closed his eyes for a moment, like the words hurt him too. She died when you were 3. I stared at him. 3. And then what? What happened to me for a year? My dad swallowed. You went to your grandmother for a while. Rebecca's mother. She couldn't do it. Health issues. Money. She reached out. Reached out to you, I said, realization sharpening. He nodded once. To me. My vision narrowed. Because you're my father. My dad didn't deny it. He just looked at me, and that was the confirmation I'd spent my whole life circling. Yes, he said, barely audible. I'm your biological father. The hallway felt too small suddenly, like the air had been sucked out. I held the paper tighter, knuckles whitening. So Mom, she knew, my dad said quickly. From the start, she knew you were mine. And Lily? I asked, though I already knew. She's hers. My dad nodded. Lily is ours. You are mine. Before Marlene. The truth landed in layers, each one heavier. So this wasn't just adoption. This wasn't just paperwork. This was my mother living with a reminder of my father's life before her, before their story, before their image, and choosing again and again to punish the reminder instead of the man. I flipped another page and found the part that explained the shape of my childhood like a map. There was a typed agreement, stapled behind the petition. It looked like something drafted by a lawyer who hated feelings. Postnuptial agreement summary, attached. My eyes skimmed, then stopped. Adoptive father agrees to designate biological child Lily Hale as primary beneficiary of life insurance policy. Adoptive father agrees to transfer ownership interest of lake cabin to adoptive mother. Adoptive mother agrees to proceed with adoption finalization. My stomach turned. This wasn't just a reluctant signature. This was a trade. My father's assets. My mother's agreement to make me legally hers. My father's silence, my mother's control. It explained everything. Why she moved like she owned the family. Why my dad went quiet. Why Lily got the soft landing and I got the chores. The distance, the constant reminder that my place was conditional. My mother didn't just resent me. She saw me as the price she paid, and the leverage she gained. My voice went low. She adopted me because she got something. My dad's face was gray. She said it was the only way she could live with it. And then she spent the rest of my life making sure I knew I wasn't wanted. I said, the words tasting like metal. My dad's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. He just nodded once, like he'd been carrying that guilt for decades. I carefully stacked the papers back into the envelope, leaving the key pages on top, the final decree, the petition signatures, the agreement summary. I slid the staples back through and pinched them down as best I could. Not perfect, but contained. Then I looked at my dad. I'm not going to read this into a microphone, but I'm not staying silent either. He breathed out. What are you going to do? I'm going to correct her, I said. Once, calmly, in a way she can't spin. My dad stared at me like he was afraid and proud at the same time. She'll explode. Let her, I said. I'm done absorbing it. We walked back into the ballroom. The lights were low, music loud, bodies moving. It would have been easy to disappear into the crowd. Instead, I walked straight toward my mother. She saw me coming and stiffened. Her smile appeared anyway. Reflexive. There you are, she said brightly, too brightly. I was wondering when you'd decide to be part of things. I looked at Sharon first, then at my mother. Marlene, I said, using her first name on purpose. No, Mom. Not tonight. Her smile twitched. I'm going to say something to you, I continued, voice even. And you're going to listen. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me. You told me today I wasn't family, I said, in front of people. A few heads turned. Not many, but enough. My mother's cheeks flushed. This is not the time. No, I agreed calmly. You chose the time when you touched my chest and pushed me out of the photo. Sharon's eyebrows lifted. My mother glanced around, gauging the attention like a politician. I pulled the envelope from my bag, held it at waist level, and kept my tone controlled. This is my adoption file, I said, the one you kept hidden for years. My mother's face went tight, the way it did when her control was threatened. Put that away. I'm not reading private details, I said, but I'm correcting a lie you've been spreading. My mother stepped closer, voice low and sharp. You're not going to ruin Lily's wedding with your drama. I met her gaze. You already brought drama when you told me I wasn't family. The word family hung between us. Then I said, clearly so the people closest could hear, you adopted me in 1992. My father is my biological father. The court decree says so. Your signature is on the petition. So if you want to keep saying I'm not family, you're not insulting me. You're admitting you've been lying about what you signed and about who you are. For a second, my mother looked genuinely stunned, like she hadn't believed I'd ever touched the truth, even if it was sitting in a safe. Then her expression twisted into rage covered by panic. You have no idea what you're talking about, she snapped. My dad stepped in beside me. Yes, he does, Ron said, and his voice carried in a way I'd never heard before. Stop. People were watching now. Not the whole room, but enough. Lily, across the floor, turned her head sharply. My mother's eyes flashed. Ron, don't you dare. I should have dared 20 years ago, my dad said, quiet but firm. You don't get to call him not family after what you agreed to, after what we did. Lily started walking toward us, her dress swaying, her face pale. What is happening? Grant followed, confusion creasing his brow. My mother instantly shifted, turning toward Lily with a brittle smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Just Ethan making a scene. I kept my eyes on Lily. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said, voice softer. But you deserve to know why she's been like this. Lily's eyes darted between my face and my father's. Why she's been like what? My mother's voice rose, desperate now. Lily, don't listen. But Lily looked right at her. Mom, stop, tell me. And in that moment, standing in the middle of her reception, with her husband and friends and in-laws watching, Lily finally didn't sound like my mother's daughter. She sounded like her own person. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked around, searching for the old safety net. People looking away, people pretending nothing was happening. But the room had changed. Sharon's face had drained of color. A couple of my aunts stared openly, no longer willing to giggle through discomfort. Grant looked like someone had handed him a crack in the foundation of his new family. My dad spoke before my mother could regain control. Ethan is my biological son, he said, from before your mom and I had you. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. What? My mother hissed. Ron, you. And Marlene adopted him, my dad continued. Legally, but she never accepted him. I let it happen. I thought keeping the family together was better than facing the truth. Lily's eyes filled fast, but her voice stayed sharp. You all knew, and you never told me. I looked at Lily, and something inside me ached, not just for myself, but for her. She'd been raised as the golden child without being told what the gold was made of. I didn't know until I was 16, I said, and even then I didn't know why. Lily stared at my mother. So when you say he's not family, my mother's lips trembled. For the first time all weekend, she looked less like a queen and more like a cornered person. I did what I had to do, she said, and it sounded like a confession even if she didn't mean it to. Lily's voice dropped. You did what you had to do to get the cabin, the money, the insurance. My mother's head snapped up. How? Lily looked at the envelope in my hand, understanding slamming into her like a wave. Grant's voice was quiet. Marlene, is this true? My mother looked at him as if he didn't have the right to ask. Then she looked at Sharon, seeking support. Sharon said nothing, just stared, mouth slightly open, like she'd finally gotten her answer and didn't like the taste of it. The social punishment didn't come as shouting, it came as silence. The kind of silence that turns a person's smile into a mask everyone can see. My mother straightened her shoulders, trying to rebuild herself. This is inappropriate, she snapped. You're all being dramatic. Lily stared at her, tears sliding down her cheeks, and said something that hit harder than any accusation. I needed you to love him, she whispered, not punish him. My mother's eyes flashed. I loved you. And you used him, Lily said, voice cracking. You used him to punish Dad, and you used Dad to get what you wanted. My dad's face crumpled. He looked like he wanted to speak, but no words came. I realized then that I'd spent my whole life waiting for my mother to claim me, but the real tragedy was that my sister had spent her whole life believing love could exist without cost. Tonight, she was learning it couldn't, at least not in our family as it had been. I took a breath and made my choice. I could stay. I could argue. I could expose every line of that agreement to the whole room. I could salt the earth. But Lily was standing in her wedding dress, crying, and the whole point of this wasn't revenge. It was dignity. So I held the envelope to my chest and said calmly, I'm not doing this here. Lily, I love you. I'm happy for you. I'm not taking your night. Lily turned to me, eyes swollen. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I nodded once. I know. Then I looked at my mother. For the record, I said, voice steady, You don't get to decide whether I'm family when the court, the paperwork, and your own signature say otherwise. You don't get to erase me because it's convenient." My mother's face tightened, and she whispered through her teeth, "You'll regret this." I leaned in slightly and answered just as quietly, "No, I regret waiting." I walked out of the ballroom without another word. Behind me, the music kept playing, but it sounded distant now, like it belonged to another life. I didn't know whether Lily would finish the night smiling. I didn't know whether my dad would finally grow a spine or retreat again. I didn't know whether my mother would spin it into a story where she was the victim. But I knew one thing for sure. For the first time, I wasn't carrying her secret for her. 2 days later, Lily called me. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd cried through the rest of the weekend. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "I swear to you, I didn't know." "I believe you," I told her. There was a pause, then she whispered, "She's furious. She's telling everyone you stole documents and tried to ruin my wedding." "I didn't steal anything," I said, "and I tried very hard not to ruin anything." "I know," Lily said, and her voice shook. "Grant knows too. And Ethan, I read some of it. Dad showed me. The agreement part." My stomach tightened. "What did you think?" "I think," she swallowed, "I think Mom built our family like a contract, like a business deal, and she made you pay for it." I closed my eyes. "Yeah," Lily sniffed. "I told her she can't come to my house until she apologizes. A real apology, not her fake ones." The words hit me in a strange way, painful and healing at the same time. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I'm not doing it for you," she said, then corrected herself. "I mean, I am, but I'm also doing it for me." I can't unsee her face when you said you were family and she still tried to push you out. I understood that. Some moments change the way you see a person permanently. In the weeks that followed, I met with Linwood. We filed to access the sealed court record properly, not just the copies my mother hoarded. It took time. It took money. It took paperwork that made me feel like I had to prove I was myself. But eventually the court released additional documents, enough to confirm what I already knew: my original name, the timeline, the reasons, the signatures, the way my adoption had been used to stitch a messy truth into a clean family story. My mother never apologized. Not really. She tried once, with a text that said, "I did what I had to do and you embarrassed me." That was her version of remorse. My dad started therapy. I didn't think he would. When he told me, he sounded embarrassed, like it was a weakness. I told him it was the first strong decision I'd seen him make in years. Lily and I got closer in a way we'd never been before. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because we finally spoke like adults who were no longer under our mother's gravity. Grant turned out to be better than I expected. He didn't defend Marlene. He defended Lily's boundaries. And me, I stopped chasing the kind of love that requires you to shrink. I stopped treating cruelty like it was normal just because it came from someone who shared a last name with me. Here's what I learned, and it took me 38 years to learn it. Family isn't the story someone tells at a wedding. It isn't who gets centered in a photograph. It isn't who gets introduced proudly and who gets assigned to help. Family is what you do when the truth is uncomfortable. My mother chose image. She chose leverage. She chose control. And for years I chose silence because I thought silence was peace. It wasn't peace. It was permission. The day she said I wasn't family, she thought she was ending the conversation. What she really did was force me to start one. I should have started a long time ago, one backed by ink, dates, signatures, and the kind of truth that doesn't care who smiles for the camera, because the truth doesn't need a place in the photo. The truth is the reason the photo exists at all.